Good day, this is Paul Williams. I work for Fortinet. I've been asked to talk to you about how we can secure and accelerate banking innovation on behalf of Fortinet Africa. So I've been in Fortinet over 9 years and I've been speaking to the financial and banking institutions on how to protect these types of environments. That said, when we're talking about financial institutions, there's this big transformation that's currently taking place of how banks are building these new systems, how they're securing their environments. Regulatory changes taking place quite vigorously inside the networks today. We're also looking at how the application is being pushed out to these smart devices, and people are no longer coming into banks unless they need to. We've had a huge epidemic in the last 2 years with regards to COVID, where a lot of remote banking, I would say 99.9% of banking, took place online. And obviously, this brings a huge cybersecurity threat to how the banks operate, how the users are obviously given access to the bank applications, how they secured, when doing these types of transactions. And but about that is not only looking at the user, is also looking at the banking environment, looking at the data center that the banks operate within, looking at the internet connections or connectivity that the banks use between banks and multiple banks globally or in the same continent. Also looking at how automation is now becoming a huge requirement inside banking, as well as artificial intelligence. And drawing this data and using this analytical data is important for the banks because they can obviously emphasize if they're having an attack taking place, if there's machine learning taking place, with regards to blockchains, higher levels of security is now required. And also, we're seeing a big push on voice assistance type systems. We're pushing banks now. So no longer we have these large data centers in these banks, but these banks now speaking have digital answering systems and RVRs that actually now do these types of services. So if we move on to the drivers of transformation, it's important that you look at how these transformations are taking place. With that space said, we've obviously seen from an industry standard, amount of breaches has increased by 12% in 2020, but the financial sector has had an increase of about 14% on a global scale. That said, there has been a decline in the financial sectors from 2019 to 2020 with regards to the amount of breaches that have been taking place as well. There are still a lot of legacy type services in these banks, the traditional old mainframe environments, but now a lot of these banks are moving towards more modern data centers. And with the modern data centers, we're looking at the new versions of Internet Protocol, or IP, as we call it, for version 4 and version 6, because the adoption rate of these applications demand that we actually have a better digital platform to actually operate within. There's been a huge increase in acquisitions of banks with regards to the applications that have been used in banks. The fluidity and the agility of the applications as well is important. And it's also brought a huge complexity of the ecosystem environment as well to banks when they're dealing with multiple other banks for clearing of monies or transferring of cash or whatever it is in these banks. So this is important when you actually look at that. This is important when you're actually dealing with other institutions, other banking institutions. You've got to ensure that not only your environment might be secure, is their environment also secure as well. So best practices I like to talk to the banks about is visibility across all your platforms, no matter if it's from the ATM to the edge of the network, into the data center, into the cloud. We're going to look at how we protect these sophisticated type threats taking place inside the banks. And these threats can not only be outside, but can also be inside. So they can be disgruntled employees, people that have actually access to the inside of the banks, inside the data centers. They obviously planting these ransomware type of attacks that maybe don't emit straight away, but they take sometimes 2 to 4 to 6 months, even sometimes a year to actually activate. With that environment, we always talk about the known and the unknown environment. And the unknown is always, you don't know what's going to happen, but when it does happen, how do you actually detect it, shut it down as fast as possible, and mitigate the risk, not only to the bank, but to all the users in the bank as well as your customer base. Simplifying compliance is an interesting one because every country that I arrive in has their own compliance in the banking sector. Depends if it's a private bank or public bank or semi or both. Government has a huge task to do with regards to regulation in banking in each country as well. So you've got to obviously adhere to that and understand how that regulation works, and then adopting the intelligence of infrastructure. So how you bring all the services and systems together in the bank, no matter if it's a camera or if it's a biometric system on a door, or if it's basically just a headless printer that's sitting in a corner doing nothing. You've got to ensure that all these devices, no matter if they're IT devices, OT devices, come together as one network and have the same visibility of strength. And that's the important bit, because the attack surface has become larger, no matter which way you turn. That said, the value of cybersecurity, in the bank is increased dramatically. Since 2018, the cost of cybersecurity wasn't great. A lot of people, still thought this as a second part of the budget. It was kind of like insurance. We'd buy it if we need it. But since 2019, and with a lot of other regulatory pushes now from government as well as the banks themselves, we've seen a huge economic growth in banking sectors, investing very heavily in cybersecurity technology. Obviously, this prioritization is important. They obviously want to reduce costs. They want to have more of a digital platform to operate within. They obviously want to ensure their risks are mitigated as fast as possible. But at the same time, if something does happen, how do they report on this? Because with the reporting, obviously, comes consequences as well. Because if something does happen, how did it happen? When did it happen? And who was obviously responsible for this? And that basically brings on to the Fortinet intelligence. We term it as the security fabric from Fortinet, where we can bring a whole lot of these solutions together, but at the same time to provide an automated platform, a broad platform that actually provides more than just a firewall. We look at basic advanced analytics data. We look at things like sandboxing, web application firewalling. We look at things like load balancing with security, endpoint security, edge security, SD-WAN, and SD branch as well. But I'll cover that later in my presentation. So if we move on to the Fortinet security fabric, this obviously gives the banks an action to look at micro view of the bank as well. So each bank, with regards to SD-WAN, for example, we have SD branch, where branches connect back to the main centers of maybe a city, like between Joburg and the smaller provinces. We have maybe an office in Harare, or it might be Lagos. And these main centers obviously service more to small centers as well. Those data centers have a back office, and those back office have to be secured. But at the same time, with us having a micro view and a macro view, we've got to ensure that all traffic transiting between these branches is secured, no matter if it's a secure between Joburg and the smaller provinces. We have maybe an office in Harare, or it might be Lagos. And these main centers obviously service more to small centers as well. Those data centers have a back office, and those back office have to be secured. But at the same time, with us having a micro view and a macro view, we've got to ensure that all traffic transiting between these branches is secured, no matter if it's a secured tunnel, if it's a secured connection, is it across the internet? If it is across the internet, how do we secure it as well? Are we challenging those devices on both sides of the network at all times? Are we monitoring those devices? Are we reporting those devices? So the point of what I'm trying to get to is basically a one-screen type of endpoint of visibility is the key part. I think gone are the days where something would happen and then users would say, okay, well, something happened, let's go and look at what happened. I think the reaction times have become faster. We talk about 0 day a couple of years ago, 0 hour, now 0 seconds. So we're now basically moving into an automation environment where if something is already happening, we can report on it and combat it as fast as possible. So the next part of that discussion point is, what are these drivers and challenges? So with each of the digital transformations within the banks themselves, they've got to obviously, as they move out of the environment, they've got to ensure even the branches themselves, the devices in the branches, the users in the branches, as well as the customers coming to those branches have secured access when they're accessing the applications. We also look at things like cloud as a service for the banks now. So a lot of the banks have actually made decisions to move part of the applications to the cloud, not all of them. They've looked at virtual financial institutions and how to actually can take these applications into a virtual environment. Looked at basically the investment of with regards to investment and mobile payments has become a huge part where they actually have other partners. So, for example, a bank will deal with a mobile operator where they cooperate together and actually have financial systems together, and that's important. So mobile payments become a big one, and this the whole thing about a smart credit card is becoming a huge discussion as well. Branch security and Wi-Fi. I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, we had a discussion with a bank, not to mention names, where their branch Wi-Fi was still open. So the answer is, why would you do that? Is the smart ATM you're putting down in the branch, is that secure? Does it have cameras? Is it if something does happen to that ATM, does it get shut down straight away? Although the money might be stolen, but nobody can actually get access into the banking's network from that specific ATM. So those are the sort of things, and then over and above that is the discussion about IoT becoming a huge discussion point with banks as well. Is the whole convergence of these networks, with OT and IoT becoming one network, and visibility on that as well. So SD-WAN, or secure SD-WAN, has been a forte of Fortinet. We've had this technology built into our architecture about 7 years already. We also introduced things like SD-branch. So although you have SD-WAN between the branch and the main center, the data center, we've got to ensure how customers can reduce costs, how they can get more visibility, how they can ensure that branch consolidation takes place, and with that, you obviously then do more digitalization in the branches as well. And over and above that is, if a branch is accessing applications via the internet or via the web, is how is that branch and that data center secure when accessing internet as well? So these are drivers of efficiency, drivers of more visibility, and obviously a huge push towards digital innovation and business continuity, no matter what happens at this time. So this is allowing banks to become more resilient, obviously more intelligent. Platforms are being put in, and obviously it creates more centric banking for these digital platforms to operate in. Cloud is interesting stuff, because I think banks have taken the cloud adoption quite seriously. There is a new ecosystem taking place in this space, where banks have said to us that, for example, we'll maybe invest maybe 40% of our applications to the banks. Some have said 10, some have said maybe more. Not to give away the prize, but it's also important that when you actually do this, certain risk elements also come into effect. So you've got to look at things like cloud connections, cloud connectivity in each country. Some of the countries in Africa are landlocked, so they don't actually have access to the sea cables, and that's a big problem. So this obviously comes down to cost as well, cost and effectiveness and efficiencies of those banks and those branches. We also got to look at, when you're moving applications to the cloud, is accessibility to these applications, are they secure in the cloud, who's actually managing these applications for me, and add moves and changes in the cloud is also important as well, because if something does break, or there's redundancy issues, you've got to ensure that your applications are always online and available to the customers to do their banking with. And then Fortinet's vision, we deal with the cloud providers today, the typical Googles, AWS's, Azure's of the world. Although that said, we also provide a large amount of firewall tap technology and other Fortinet technology in the private cloud space as well. Those are typically, dealing with your VMwares, your Oracles of the world, the IBMs of the world. So cloud connectivity has become a big discussion point. How's the cloud's connected? Do I get visibility in the cloud? The answer is yes, you do. You can actually do more than just this. You can actually, create a hybrid cloud as well if you want for this environment. Is how's my policy applied? If I operate from one branch to another, does that profile or policy follow me? The answer is yes, it should. Segmentation has become a big discussion around that, because segmentation inside the networks is a thing of basic great value when you're talking to customers about this. And system analytics is, if a breach does take place, is how do I combat it? What happened, and then how to report on it, because if breaches are taking place, it can cost banks millions and millions of dollars or rands or whatever the currency is per hour when the bank is actually being shut down because they're trying to get the system back up and running. And with that said, a lot of the banks are dealing with other businesses as well. So you have a lot of business-to-business application, business-to-commercial applications that deal with each other, and all those applications dealing with the banks themselves, where you're clearing finance and funds, and you're clearing information, whatever it is, if it's transacting, legal documentation, whatever, is all those networks are always secure, because they have to be online 24/7 by 365. So that's a different discussion point to have with customers too. Then the digital ecosystem, Fortinet has built a large platform with digital ecosystems. Our thought leadership in this space is trying to create an open API, which we have done. Over 420 of these partners work with us today on a daily basis. These are partners like IBM, the likes of Cisco, HP, many more. And what we do is try and provide an open API we can actually have a seamless type digital transferring of data between ourselves and third-party applications as well. The customer expectation is, seamless digital offerings. That's very important. Obviously secured as well, very, very important. Regulatory landscape has to always be top of mind. You got to ensure that we have things like your PCI DSS standards that are built in, your ISO 27001 standards are built in, POPI, for example, in South Africa. And then the dynamics of the banks are changing. When we look at neobanks are taking place now, we look at the things like IP economies are taking place, blockchain, things like cryptocurrency is becoming a big discussion with banks and how they manage that. So let's see how that's going to pan out. But that said, is that the banking applications itself always has to be secure and basically has to be thought of as a place for markets in the future as well. Fortinet's solution basically is a broad-based solution. We have visibility and we try and protect every part and element of the network as well. That said, the digital surface has become large, has become more risk, and we want obviously trying to reduce the risk averseness in that environment. The integrated solution, reduces management. We have management products today. We have things like SIEM products. We have SOAR products, endpoint products. We have threat and detect products that on the endpoints themselves. We do obviously push very hard with regards to two-factor authentication in the banks with zero trust type environments, network access control applications. And that said, is that the traditional SD-WAN and SD-branch is becoming a fundamental discussion of all banks that we talk to as well. An automated approach is very important. So you've got to ensure that if you are having, we do have risk audits every year, that audit information can be drawn out of the cybersecurity technology that you do implement. You've got to ensure that you're driving a huge or a lot amount of AI into the banking applications as well. We can actually extract information, see how to better streamline these applications and streamline the banking systems themselves, and then use that as planning and efficiency information, obviously answering to the business and the shareholders of the business as well. So that's the last slide of my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I only really had 10 minutes to talk to you, but that said, if there's any further questions, please let me know. I will be online to talk to you about this. Thank you very much for your time. And